Samira Watkins, a 25-year-old single mother, went missing on the night of October 29, 2009, after leaving work at a McDonald's restaurant where she was a manager. She had planned to visit her boyfriend, Zachary Littleton, a member of the U.S. Navy stationed at Pensacola Naval Air Station. Samira's family grew worried when she didn't return home the next day. Her sister, Sylvia Watkins, became increasingly concerned, calling Samira's phone throughout the day, but the calls eventually went straight to voicemail. The family's anxiety intensified, especially because Samira had a 4-year-old son to care for and was known to be very responsible. On October 31, Sylvia contacted the police, prompting them to launch an investigation into Samira's disappearance. The situation was immediately deemed suspicious. Pensacola Police Detective Jonathan Thayer responded to the call and soon realized this was no ordinary missing person case. Samira's sudden disappearance raised alarm bells, given her stable family life and budding career ambitions. In addition to her job at McDonald's, she was attending college with the goal of becoming a dental assistant. The family provided vital details to the police, including the fact that Samira had recently started a relationship with Zachary Littleton. Samira's family, especially Sylvia, also conducted their own search. Sylvia went to Zachary's residence and was surprised when a neighbor informed her that Zachary had been moving furniture, including a couch, and was supposedly relocating to a bigger place for his wife and kids. This revelation was a shock. Samira's family was under the impression that Zachary, whom Samira called Ricky, was a single man. The discovery of his marriage and the fact that he had children placed Zachary under heavy suspicion. It quickly became apparent that Zachary had been leading a double life, hiding his marriage from Samira. The investigation took another twist when the family revealed that Samira had recently discovered she was pregnant. Samira's pregnancy and Zachary's reaction to the news were significant factors in the case. According to her family, Zachary had pressured Samira to get an abortion, and when she refused, he became aggressive, even allegedly threatening to harm her. With these troubling pieces of information in hand, police intensified their efforts to locate Samira and interrogate Zachary. The interrogation of suspects and the complex web of relationships. As part of the investigation, police interviewed Zachary Littleton, who quickly became the prime suspect in Samira's disappearance. During the interrogation, Zachary initially denied seeing Samira on the night of October 29, contradicting Samira's family's account that she had gone to his house that evening. He also denied any serious romantic relationship with her, describing their connection as casual, despite evidence that Samira was deeply invested in the relationship and had even envisioned a future with him. Zachary's behavior during the interview raised suspicions. When detectives asked him about Samira's pregnancy, he feigned ignorance, claiming she had never directly told him she was pregnant with his child. However, Samira's family had provided police with information that contradicted Zachary's statements. They recounted that he had been upset by the news of her pregnancy and had made alarming comments, including threats to harm her if she didn't terminate the pregnancy. Despite these red flags, Zachary maintained that he had been home alone on the night of her disappearance, packing his belongings in preparation for his wife and child's upcoming move to Pensacola. Although Zachary remained the prime suspect, the investigation broadened when police discovered that Samira had a tumultuous past with another man, William Peters. William was the father of Samira's 4-year-old son and had recently been released from prison, where he had served time for assaulting Samira. She had a restraining order against him, but his release from prison coincided with her disappearance, leading investigators to consider the possibility that he too could be involved. William's history of violent behavior and their complicated relationship made him a viable suspect, and his release added another layer of complexity to the investigation. Detectives interviewed William Peters and his family, trying to piece together his whereabouts on the night of Samira's disappearance. William claimed he had been home all night, waiting for Samira to drop off their child as planned, but she never showed up. His family corroborated his story, but police remained skeptical. The volatile nature of their past relationship, combined with William's criminal history, meant he couldn't be ruled out as a suspect. Despite focusing on both Zachary Littleton and William Peters, the investigation faced significant challenges. There was no physical evidence linking either man to Samira's disappearance, and both maintained their innocence. Investigators were left with circumstantial evidence, conflicting stories, and 2 suspects with motives but no clear proof. As the case unfolded, law enforcement remained determined to uncover the truth and bring justice for Samira Watkins and her young son. The interrogation and elimination of William Peters as a suspect. In the investigation surrounding Samira Watkins' disappearance, police initially considered William Peters, the father of Samira's 4-year-old child, as a prime suspect. Peters had a history of violence towards Samira, having been jailed for previous assaults against her. Upon his release from prison, coinciding with the time of her disappearance, Peters' involvement seemed plausible. However, the more detectives probed, the more they started to rule him out. When police informed Peters of Samira's disappearance, his reaction was genuine concern and distress, particularly for their child, who would be left motherless if Samira wasn't found. Peters' emotional response stood in stark contrast to the cold demeanor displayed by Zachary Littleton, Samira's boyfriend at the time, who had shown little to no concern for her well-being. Investigators noted Peters' intense worry for the future of his child, indicating his vested interest in Samira's safe return. During interviews, Peters was cooperative and displayed visible anxiety over her disappearance, expressing fears for her safety and the impact it would have on their son. His emotional reaction, combined with his whereabouts being well verified at the time of Samira's disappearance, convinced the investigators that Peters wasn't involved in any foul play. The nail in the coffin came when investigators observed the drastic difference between Peters' emotional state and Zachary Littleton's aloofness. Peters demonstrated a natural concern for his family, whereas Littleton appeared disinterested in Samira's fate. Based on this, police ruled out William Peters as a suspect, redirecting their attention toward Littleton, whose evasive behavior and secretive personal life raised many red flags in the investigation. Zachary Littleton's evasive behavior and key breakthrough in the case. As William Peters was ruled out, Detective Jonathan Thayer turned his attention back to Zachary Littleton, Samira's boyfriend and a U.S. Navy sailor. Littleton, who had been having a secret affair with Samira, reacted defensively when questioned about their relationship. During his initial interrogation, he denied any significant emotional attachment to Samira, describing her as just one of many extramarital relationships. Littleton even went so far as to admit that he had multiple cell phones, one of which was a burner phone he used to communicate with women, including Samira. The discovery of the burner phone further cemented the idea that Littleton was hiding much of his private life from investigators. He had used this phone to carry on his affair, keeping his wife in the dark about his infidelity. His cavalier attitude towards his relationship with Samira and the child she was carrying raised alarm bells for law enforcement, particularly when Littleton showed no visible concern for her disappearance. The most suspicious moment came when Littleton referred to Samira in the past tense during the interview, despite her status as a missing person. Referring to her in this way at a time when missing persons are often found alive, hinted that Littleton knew more than he was letting on. Despite his constant denials, it became clear to the detectives that Littleton was trying to cover up something. Zachary's motive became even more apparent during the course of the investigation. Samira's pregnancy threatened his stable life with his wife and child. Under military rules, adultery is a punishable offense, and Littleton risked significant personal and professional consequences if Samira's pregnancy were revealed. Faced with the pressures of protecting his family and his military career, detectives believe Littleton may have resorted to extreme measures to remove Samira from the picture. The case took a critical turn 4 days after Samira's disappearance, on November 3rd, when a local jet skier reported discovering a suspicious black duffel bag washed ashore near the Pensacola Naval Air Station. Law enforcement responded swiftly and, upon investigating the bag, discovered the decomposing body of a black female. Inside the bag, they found Samira Watkins, duct tape wrapped tightly around her face, wearing only a bra with the rest of her body nude. Additionally, a folded-up Clorox wipe and a paper towel were found at the bottom of the bag. A fingerprint analysis quickly confirmed that the body was indeed Samira's. This grim discovery was the breakthrough law enforcement needed. It not only confirmed that Samira had met a violent end, but also suggested that her death had been a premeditated act. Littleton, with his ties to the area and suspicious behavior during questioning, now became the prime focus of the investigation. Detectives believed that his motive, protecting his marriage and military career from the fallout of an unplanned pregnancy, likely drove him to commit the crime. The discovery of Samira's body in such a manner shifted the investigation from a missing person case to a homicide. Law enforcement now had a clear path forward, focusing on building the case against Littleton as they sought justice for Samira Watkins and her family. The case evolution and key evidence leading to suspect identification. The investigation into Samira Watkins' disappearance quickly evolved from a missing persons case into a homicide. The pivotal moment came when the medical examiner determined that Samira had died of asphyxiation, likely caused by suffocation. One key clue that emerged from the autopsy was the presence of duct tape around her face and head, but more intriguingly, Samira was only wearing one of her sentimental gold hoop earrings. Surveillance footage from the fast food restaurant where Samira had worked the night she was last seen confirmed she had both earrings on at the time, implying that the other had been lost during a struggle. This missing earring became a significant piece of the puzzle. Investigators surmised that it likely fell off during an altercation, meaning that whoever was in possession of the other earring could be directly linked to Samira's death. Zachary Littleton, a Navy officer, quickly became a prime suspect, but without direct evidence, law enforcement faced challenges in connecting him to the crime. To overcome these obstacles, they enlisted the help of the Naval Criminal Investigative Service, NCIS, knowing that Littleton's connections within the Navy could provide essential leads. NCIS agents worked closely with detectives, conducting interviews and gathering records from Littleton's military colleagues. Among the details revealed was the suspicious behavior exhibited by Littleton in the hours following Samira's disappearance. His alibi was weakened when one of his friends reported that Littleton had been unprepared for a planned move, contradicting his claim that he had spent the night packing. Furthermore, a witness mentioned that Littleton had shown up at her home early the next morning to do laundry, a highly unusual request that investigators believed was an attempt to destroy evidence, possibly involving blood or other forensic traces. As the investigation progressed, law enforcement focused on piecing together Samira's final hours. Littleton's conflicting statements about when he last saw her, combined with the discovery of her car abandoned in a driveway, raised further suspicions. DNA evidence found on the steering wheel of Samira's car linked Littleton to the vehicle, despite his insistence that he had never been inside it. These findings brought investigators one step closer to unraveling the truth. Breakthroughs in the investigation and the role of technology. The turning point in the investigation came when investigators conducted a search warrant on Zachary Littleton's new home. While searching his residence, they discovered paper towels matching those found in the duffel bag containing Samira's body. Additionally, they found Clorox wipes consistent with the ones located at the crime scene. However, the most crucial piece of evidence was a gold hoop earring that perfectly matched the one Samira was wearing at the time of her disappearance. This discovery served as a major breakthrough, solidifying Littleton's connection to the crime. The investigators then formulated a theory. On the night of October 29, 2009, Samira went to Littleton's apartment, where neighbors reported hearing them arguing. Sometime after the argument, it is believed that Littleton suffocated Samira, possibly by smothering her, and used duct tape to bind her. After her death, he placed her body in a duffel bag, transported it using her car, and disposed of it in a remote waterway near the Pensacola Naval Air Station. He then abandoned Samira's car in a nearby driveway, attempting to cover his tracks. One of the key elements that helped investigators confirm their theory was the use of advanced cell phone mapping technology provided by NCIS. By analyzing the cell phone tower pings of both Samira and Littleton's phones, investigators were able to track their movements on the night of her disappearance. The data showed that after leaving her fast food job, Samira traveled to Littleton's house, corroborating the timeline that investigators had developed. Moreover, the cell phone records revealed that Littleton had been using a burner phone to communicate with Samira in the days leading up to her death, attempting to hide their relationship and avoid detection. The combination of cell phone data, forensic evidence, and witness testimony painted a clear picture of the events leading to Samira's murder. The gold earring, the DNA in her car, and the paper towels at Littleton's home served as irrefutable evidence that he was involved in the crime. In the end, the cooperation between local law enforcement and NCIS, along with the use of technology, allowed investigators to build a solid case against Littleton, providing justice for Samira and her family. The circumstantial evidence against Zachary Littleton. The investigation into the murder of Samira Watkins unfolded as law enforcement pieces together circumstantial evidence linking Zachary Littleton to the crime. Initially, Littleton claimed he was at home all night when Samira went missing. However, cell phone data contradicted his alibi, showing he was near the location where Samira's body was eventually discovered. Notably, Littleton's story fell apart when police discovered his movements through cell records, indicating he had left his house shortly after the crime occurred. The critical breakthrough came when investigators focused on the fact that Samira's car was found approximately 10 miles from Littleton's home. This led to questioning how he returned home after abandoning her vehicle. Taxicab records revealed that he had taken a cab from a Waffle House to his residence, and surveillance footage captured him inside the restaurant at around 4:20 a.m. He was seen carrying Clorox wipes, a detail that raised significant suspicion given their potential use for cleaning up blood or other evidence. This footage, particularly the moment he looked directly into the camera, marked a turning point in the case as it suggested a level of arrogance or ignorance regarding the surveillance, ultimately aiding in the prosecution's narrative. Following this, law enforcement gathered additional incriminating evidence against Littleton. The most compelling piece was the discovery of a gold hoops earring belonging to Samira at his residence, which served as a tangible connection to the crime. This evidence led investigators to further scrutinize Littleton's online activities. They discovered a series of disturbing internet searches on his computer, which included queries about how long it takes for a body to decompose, methods for disposing of a body, and ways to induce abortion. Such searches painted a grim picture of Littleton's mindset, revealing a premeditated intent to harm and cover up his actions. With the accumulation of circumstantial evidence, from cell phone data and taxi records to the earring internet searches, the case against Littleton solidified. Despite the absence of direct forensic evidence tying him to the murder, the prosecution felt confident that the weight of circumstantial evidence would lead to a conviction. This case highlights the power of indirect evidence in criminal prosecutions, particularly when it presents a comprehensive timeline of actions and intentions. The trial and its outcomes. As the trial began nearly 2 years after Samira's murder, the prosecution faced the daunting task of convincing the jury of Zachary Littleton's guilt based solely on circumstantial evidence. The trial strategy focused on creating a timeline that detailed the progression of Littleton's relationship with Samira and the events leading up to her death. This narrative aimed to connect the dots and emphasize Littleton's possible motives, such as his fear of the consequences he would face in the military if his affair became public knowledge, particularly given his wife's past ultimatum regarding infidelity. During the trial, the defense capitalized on the lack of direct physical evidence, arguing that the circumstantial nature of the case could not conclusively prove Littleton's guilt. They pointed out that there were no eyewitnesses or forensic evidence directly linking him to the murder scene. However, the prosecution countered this by illustrating how Littleton's behavior, both during police interviews and through his online searches, indicated a consciousness of guilt. The jury observed him as a manipulative individual whose lies and deceit unraveled as the trial progressed. The evidence presented was compelling enough to sway the jury's opinion. After only 3 hours of deliberation, they returned a guilty verdict for first-degree premeditated murder. The reaction of the jury indicated that they viewed Littleton not only as a liar but also as a sociopath who exploited his position and charm to deceive Samira, leading to her tragic death. The presence of the gold hoop earring found in Littleton's apartment served as a pivotal piece of evidence that contributed to their decision, acting as a near smoking gun linking him to the crime. On June 30, the jury's verdict ultimately led to Littleton being sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. This sentencing was seen as a significant measure of justice for Samira Watkins and her family, who had suffered immensely from her loss. The tragic outcome of Samira's life, characterized by her desire to create a better future for herself and her young son, underscored the senselessness of the crime. Her son was left motherless, and her family lost a beloved member, all due to the selfish actions of Zachary Littleton. The case serves as a stark reminder of the implications of unchecked deceit and violence, especially when motivated by personal desperation. The combination of circumstantial evidence, compelling witness testimony, and the strategic presentation of the prosecution ultimately brought about a measure of justice for Samira Watkins, allowing her family to begin the healing process after such a devastating loss.